The young waitress slid the plate of pancakes across the table, leaned in, and whispered, "Same as always, honey. No charge." She didn't know his name, didn't ask where he came from. She just fed him, day after day. But on this particular morning, something happened that no one in town would ever forget. Four black SUVs, polished like mirrors, pulled into the dusty parking lot of the diner. Doors opened in perfect unison. And from the lead vehicle stepped a man in full military dress uniform, holding a carefully folded letter in one hand and purpose in the other. The room went silent. Forks froze midair. Even the air felt heavier. Then a woman stepped out from behind the counter, and something refranctilienable happened. Everyone stood. Who was she? Why did a high-ranking military officer come all this way, just to find a small-town waitress with flour on her apron and tired eyes? What did she do? That made soldiers salute and an entire community fall silent. Let's go back to where it all began. Because behind that plate of pancakes was a story no one ever expected. Clara Hayes, 28 years old, worked at a small diner called the Sunny Table, a modest little place nestled between a flower shop and a used bookstore, in a peaceful countryside town where mornings were slow and silence came easy. Her days followed a gentle, predictable rhythm. Wake before the sun, walk 3 empty blocks, tie on a faded ash-gray apron worn soft from years of use, and greet the early regulars with a smile that never hinted at the weariness beneath it. She lived alone in a modest apartment above the town's century-old pharmacy. Her family? Just a few dusty photo frames scattered on a narrow shelf. Her father passed away when Clara was in 9th grade. Her mother followed not long after. The grandmother who raised her eventually moved to Florida for health reasons. They stayed in touch through holiday cards and phone calls, filled more with silence than words. It was on a chilly Monday morning in early autumn that Clara first noticed the boy. He couldn't have been more than 10, small, underweight, with cautious eyes that seemed to study every person in the room, while revealing absolutely nothing of himself. He always sat in the farthest booth by the window, tucked neatly into the corner. A worn-out backpack, far too large for him, rested at his side, and a book lay open on the table, though he rarely seemed to read it. That first day, he ordered only a glass of water. Clara brought it with a quiet smile and a thin slice of lemon, just because. He nodded a thank you, so subtle it might have been missed by anyone who wasn't really paying attention. The second day, the same. The third, no different. By the second week, Clara noticed the pattern. He always arrived at exactly 7:20 a.m., 30 minutes before the elementary school near the old post office started classes. He would sit, flip through the same book, sip his water slowly, and quietly observe other customers as they ordered waffles, sausage links, sunny-side-up eggs, and homemade strawberry jam. At exactly 7:50, he'd close the book, nod again, and leave, without ever touching a bite of food. On the 15th morning, something quietly shifted. Clara, slightly distracted, brought him a plate of pancakes by mistake. "Oh, sorry about that," she said softly, her voice carrying a hint of hesitation. "The kitchen made an extra. I figured it was better to leave it here than toss it out." The boy looked up, suspicion flickering in his eyes, but something deeper was behind it. Hunger. "It's all right," Clara added gently, offering a small smile. "Sometimes the cook mixes things up. Better to eat it than waste it, right?" Before he could say anything, she turned and walked away, pretending to busy herself behind the counter. From the corner of her eye, she saw him slowly reach for the fork. 10 minutes later, when she returned, the plate was empty, but his eyes remained fixed on his book, as if she wasn't even there. It tugged at something deep in her chest. "Thank you," he whispered as she cleared the plate. From that morning on, it became their silent ritual. Each day, Claire would bring him the so-called extra order, pancakes on one day, scrambled eggs in toast on another, oatmeal with brown sugar when the mornings turned cold. He never asked for anything, never said more than a quiet thank you, but he always ate, sometimes so fast, it seemed like he was afraid the food might vanish if he waited too long. "Who's the kid you keep feeding?" Walter Briggs, a retired postal worker who claimed the same stool every morning, finally asked. Never seen his parents. But Clara simply shrugged. I don't know, she said, but he's hungry. Jiam. Later that week, Rita, the woman working the grill, pulled Clara aside in the back. You're feeding a stray, she said, not unkindly, but with the bluntness of someone who's seen good intentions go sideways. You give handouts, they forget to say thanks. Then one day they're gone, just like that. They always are. Clara didn't argue. She just said softly, it's okay. I used to be that hungry too. It was the most personal thing she'd said to anyone at the Sunny table in 3 years. Who I am. The boy he never gave his name, and Clara never asked. There was something in the way he moved, how carefully he stepped through the door, how he always picked the booth where he could see both the entrance and the window. She knew questions would only make him disappear. So instead, she made sure his water glass stayed full, that his food was warm, that for just 40 minutes each morning, the diner could be a place where he didn't have to be on guard. Sometimes when the place was quiet and he was lost in his book, Clara let her mind wander. Did he live nearby? Did anyone know where he went? Why was he always alone? And why did hunger cling to him like something familiar? Something he had learned to live with. But she never let those questions reach her lips. Because in her experience, kindness that comes with conditions isn't really kindness at all. So she continued, quietly, no questions, no expectations. And slowly, something changed. His shoulders, once always tense, always braced, began to ease. His eyes started meeting hers. Not for long, but just a little longer each day. That small moment of eye contact, what once lasted only a blink, now stretched to 2, was enough to reassure Clara that whatever she was doing, no matter how small, it mattered. By the 6th week, people had started to notice. Most kept their thoughts to themselves, but not everyone did. Playing charity worker on company time? A sharply dressed businessman sneered one morning, his tone dripping with judgment. Kids these days expect handouts everywhere. He scoffed again, shaking his head in disapproval. Different world now, another regular added, not unkindly but with a nostalgic shrug. Back in my day, no one gave away food just because someone looked sad. Clara heard it all, every comment, every sideways glance, but she let the words slide off her like rain on a window pane. She had learned long ago, trying to justify kindness to someone who's already chosen cruelty only hardens their heart further. But some people couldn't be ignored so easily. One quiet morning, Frank Delaney, the diner's manager, called Clara into the tiny cluttered office behind the kitchen. His forehead, as always, glistened with sweat. His voice was flat, but firm. I've been watching how you are with that kid, he said, tapping his fingers on the chipped laminate desk. We can't have staff giving away free meals. It's bad for business, and it sets a precedent. Though Clara twisted the hem of her apron in her hands. I understand, she replied softly. I'll pay for it myself. Frank raised his eyebrows. From your tips? Clara, those barely cover your rent. It's my choice, she said, her voice steady now. Just 1 meal a day I can manage. He studied her for a moment longer than she expected. Then finally, with a sigh, he leaned back. Fine, but if it ever interferes with your work, or if that kid causes even a hint of trouble, it stops. Understood? Clara nodded. Relief swept through her chest. She had braced herself for worse. A warning. Maybe even getting fired. But this was a compromise she could live with. From then on, every morning before her shift began, she set aside part of her tips. Money she could have used for a new winter coat, or the dentist appointment she kept postponing, and paid for the boys' breakfast. Chatting. Then came a Thursday in mid-November, and for the first time in weeks, the boy didn't show up. Clara tried not to let it bother her, but every few minutes her eyes drifted toward the front door, the quiet sense of unease in her chest slowly deepening. Still, Clara made his usual plate of pancakes, placed it at his empty booth, just in case. We out here feeding ghosts now? Rita muttered as she passed by, shaking her head. By closing time, the plate remained untouched. A quiet accusation. Clara couldn't bring herself to throw it away. She wrapped it carefully, took it home, and placed it in her fridge like something sacred. The boy didn't come the next day, or the day after that. A full week passed, and with each day, the hope in Clara's chest dimmed a little more. Maybe Rita had been right. Maybe he'd moved on, like strays always do. It shouldn't have hurt. But it did. She didn't know his name, not his story, not even where he went when he left the sunny table. But his absence felt like something important had quietly disappeared, like a small light had been gently but completely extinguished. Told you, Rita said on the 10th morning of silence. Not cruelly, just certain. They never stick around once the free ride ends.
Jack.
That same week, Clara noticed a new customer. Middle-aged, too quiet. He kept taking pictures of the empty booth. The next day, she found out why. A local Facebook group had posted the photos, along with a mocking caption, "The sunny table, now serving imaginary charity cases." The comments were worse. Publicity stunt. Bet they say the food goes to underprivileged kids while tossing it in the trash. Feeding strays just makes them dependent. That waitress needs a reality check. Next time a strange kid shows up, remember, you're being set up. Clara, Clara never considered herself someone who cared about what strangers online thought, but the cruelty stung. Their words echoed louder than she expected. That night, alone in her apartment, Clara questioned herself for the first time. Had she been foolish, helping someone she knew nothing about? Was she just projecting her own past onto a situation she didn't understand, trying to fix an old wound by tending to someone else's? Seeking comfort, she reached for the small wooden box tucked beneath her bed, the one where she kept the things that mattered most. Inside, a faded photograph of her father. He wore his Army medic uniform, his smile soft despite the harsh desert behind him. Next to it lay a small leather journal, the kind that's been everywhere, held through dust, rain, and time. She opened it to the page she always turned to when she needed clarity, and read the words she had memorized long ago. Shared a half ration with a local boy today. Johnson said I was crazy, that the kid might report our position to hostels. Maybe. But the look in his eyes when he ate, same as mine when Mom saved me the last piece of bread during the hard times. No one grows poorer by sharing half a loaf, but those who forget to share remain hungry their whole lives. Clara traced her finger over the faded handwriting, and just like that, clarity returned. She didn't need to know the boy's name, didn't need to know his story. Hunger was easy to recognize, whether it lived in the belly or in the soul. And hunger didn't ask for background checks. It simply asked for bread. No one remembered the names of those who helped. No one wrote down the stories of quiet kindness. But every morning, because of her, someone wasn't hungry anymore. And that was enough. If you still believe that small acts of kindness can change someone's life, type hope in the comments. Day 23, the boy still hadn't returned. Clara showed up at the sunny table just like she always did, her hope worn thin, but her habits still intact. She still glanced toward the door at 7:20 a.m., the time he always used to come in, but the sharp edge of anticipation had dulled, turned into something quieter, softer, resignation. Still, she made the pancakes, placed the plate at his booth, just in case. And then, at exactly 9:17 a.m., everything changed. The first sign wasn't noise, it was the absence of it. Not quiet, stillness. Forks froze midair. Conversations trailed into silence. Even the radio behind the counter seemed to hush itself. Clara looked up from refilling a mug, just in time to see 4 black SUVs pull into the parking lot. Government plates, windows tinted dark, they moved with military precision, forming a perfect semicircle in front of the diner. Uniformed men stepped out from each vehicle, snapping into position beside their doors, hands behind their backs, eyes forward. Then the lead car opened, and out stepped a man who seemed to carry the weight of 100 stories on his shoulders. Tall, weathered, dressed in full military formal, rows of medals across his chest catching the late morning sun in sharp flashes of gold and silver. He didn't hesitate, didn't stop to scan the building. He walked forward like every step had already been decided. 2 younger officers flanked him in silence. Inside the diner, the bell above the door chimed. The sound rang louder than usual, as if even it understood the gravity of the moment. From the back, Frank Delaney appeared. Then, he tugged at his tie, eyes flicking between the officers and the stunned customers. "C- Can I help you, gentlemen?" he asked, voice thinner than usual. The senior officer removed his cap. His voice was calm, controlled. "I'm looking for someone who works here, a woman named Clara." The diner went silent in a whole new way. You could hear the buzz of the refrigerator, the faint tick of the wall clock. All eyes turned to Clara. She took a small step forward, still holding the coffee pot, though her hands had started to tremble. "I'm Clara," she said, her voice steady in sound, though not in feeling. The officer's stern expression softened, just slightly. "Clara Hayes," which Deponce asked. She nodded once, setting the pot down gently before it could slip from her grip. "My name is Colonel Richard Lane," he said, standing tall. "United States Army, Special Forces Command." He reached into the inside of his uniform, pulled out a sealed envelope, crisp, official, and extended it toward her. "I'm here because of a promise made by one of my men." He paused. "And I also carry a personal message from Noah's father." "Noah?" Clara repeated softly, the name unfamiliar on her lips. And yet it stirred something deep inside her, something quiet, something that felt like it had always been true. "The boy you've been feeding for the past few months," Colonel Lane explained. "Noah Bennett. His father was Master Sergeant Michael Bennett, one of the finest men I ever had the honor of serving alongside." Was, that single word, spoken in the past tense, landed like a weight in Clara's chest. I don't understand," she said, eyes still fixed on the envelope in his hand. Is he all right?" "He's safe," the colonel assured her with a gentle nod. "He's with his grandparents now, in Colorado. But for nearly 3 months, every morning before school, he came here, right after his father was deployed on a classified mission. And suddenly, everything made sense. The silence, the way he always kept an eye on the door, the hunger that seemed to live in more than just his stomach. It was all real. And it had meant so much more than she ever realized. What Sergeant Bennett never knew," Colonel Lane continued, "was that shortly after he left, his wife walked out. She left Noah behind." A hush rippled through the diner. Not loud, but felt. Even the faint clink of silverware had gone silent. "He was scared," the colonel said quietly. "Afraid if anyone found out, they'd take him away, so he said nothing, survived on his own. Stretched the emergency funds his father had left behind, did what he could to stay invisible. Until school, until you." Clara's throat tightened. Noah. Now he had a name, a history. He hadn't just been hungry, he had been alone, waiting for a father who would never come home. "Sergeant Bennett was killed in Afghanistan 2 months ago," the colonel said, his voice still steady, but carrying the weight of grief underneath. "In his final letter, he made one request. If anything happened to him, find the woman at the diner, the one who fed his son." He reached into the envelope, unfolding a worn piece of paper, creased and smudged by time and travel. "If I don't make it back, please find the person who gave my son breakfast." Noah wrote about her in every letter, said she never asked why he was alone, never made him feel ashamed. She just brought him food every morning, no questions, no expectations. "Tell her she didn't just feed a hungry child, she preserved the dignity of a soldier's son." Clara's hands trembled as she took the letter. Tears blurred the words, blurred the room, blurred the moment. She could still hear the colonel's voice, distant now, like it was echoing from another world. That letter was read at Sergeant Bennett's memorial. "And when Noah finally told us who you were, the entire Special Forces community made it our mission to find you. And thank you. Not just with words, but in person." He paused, his voice softer now, but more certain than ever. "What you did for the child of one of our own, without knowing his name, without asking why, that means something. To all of us." Even those who had once mocked her now sat in silence. Some with wide eyes, some with bowed heads. Faces that now held the weight of shame and something else. Respect. Colonel Lane stood tall, snapped to attention, and rendered a formal salute. A gesture of profound respect, rarely given to civilians. Behind him, every military person in the diner and outside by the SUVs followed suit. The colonel's voice carried the weight of something sacred. On behalf of the United States Army Special Forces, the brothers in arms of Master Sergeant Bennett, and most importantly, on behalf of Noah, thank you. Clara stood frozen, stunned. Her mind struggled to process the weight of it all, that her simple acts of kindness, pancakes and eggs, a glass of milk, a smile without questions, had meant everything to a boy enduring the unimaginable, and to a father fighting his last battles, far from home. I didn't know, she whispered, her voice barely audible. I just couldn't let him go hungry. The colonel nodded. Sometimes that's enough, Miss Hayes. Feeding a hungry child without asking why they're hungry is the greatest kindness of all. As if on cue, every uniformed soldier, inside and out, saluted in perfect unison. The diner stood too. One by one, they rose silently from their booths in a gesture of solemn respect. Clara, the quiet waitress who had lived almost invisibly for years, now stood at the center of it all, clutching a fallen soldier's final thank you in her trembling hands. A woman whose quiet generosity had preserved not just a child's well-being, but a soldier's honor and peace of mind in his final days. The week following Colonel Lane's visit changed Rosie's diner forever. The story spread like wildfire, first through whispers, then on social media, and finally in the local paper. The same Facebook group that had once mocked Clara's supposed charity case now shared a heartfelt retelling of Master Sergeant Bennett's letter. It gathered thousands of shares, thousands of comments. Thank you for reminding us what really matters. My son is in the Navy. Your kindness gives me hope. Customers started requesting Clara's section specifically. Tips became generous. Notes of gratitude were tucked beneath coffee cups. Frank Delaney, the manager who once grumbled about free pancakes, hung a small American flag above the booth where Noah used to sit. Beneath it, he placed a simple, respectful plaque, reserved for those who serve and the families who wait. That booth was never empty again. Veterans, active duty soldiers passing through, families quietly struggling, and every one of them treated with dignity, no questions asked. 1 week after the colonel's visit, a manila envelope arrived addressed to Clara. Inside, a handwritten letter, lined notebook paper, careful block letters betraying the youth of its author. Dear Miss Clara, I didn't know your name until the day the colonel came. But for those months, you were the only person who looked at me like I wasn't invisible, like I wasn't broken. Dad always told me that real heroes don't wear capes. They wear uniforms. But I think sometimes they wear aprons too. When Dad stopped writing, I thought the world had forgotten both of us. But you remembered me, every day, even when I couldn't tell you why I was alone. Grandma and Grandpa are nice. They're teaching me to fish, and Grandma makes good cookies. But I miss Dad, and sometimes I miss your pancakes too. Thank you for not asking questions when I didn't have the answers. Your friend, Noah Bennett, P.S. I finished the book I was reading. It had a happy ending, after all. Clara framed the letter. She hung it behind the counter, not prominently, not for attention, but as a quiet reminder of why small kindness matters. When customers asked about it, she'd simply smile and say, just a thank you note from a special customer. Word of the diner's story traveled far. Military communities across the country shared it. Soldiers passing through town made detours to visit. Many left behind unit coins, patches, tokens of gratitude, all pinned to a small bulletin board behind the counter, a growing collage of thanks from around the world. 3 months later, after a local school field trip, a group of students visited the diner. An 8-year-old girl with big, curious eyes watched Clara as she poured water. My dad says you're a hero, she said matter-of-factly. Do you feel like one? Clara smiled, kneeling beside her. No, sweetheart. I'm just someone who knows what it feels like to be hungry. Not just for food, the girl's teacher added gently, having overheard. Clara looked up and nodded. The teacher was right. Hunger came in many forms. Food was just the most obvious. That summer, Rosie's Diner hosted a fundraiser for military families. They raised enough to start an emergency fund for children of deployed parents. Frank Delaney matched the donations himself. He pulled Clara aside afterward. Never understood why my old man insisted on feeding every stray kid in the neighborhood, he said with a sheepish smile. Drove my mom crazy, but I think I get it now. Sometimes a meal is more than food. On a quiet Tuesday morning, almost 1 year after Noah first walked into the diner, Clara arrived for her shift and found something small and metallic beside her order pad. A challenge coin, the kind given in the military only within trusted ranks. One side bore the insignia of the Special Forces. The other side had been custom engraved. Seer Memoir, always remembering. She looked around the empty diner, no unfamiliar faces, no military vehicles. She stepped outside, scanning the street. Just the town waking up, sprinklers ticking across lawns, the school bus in the distance, birds greeting the dawn. She slipped the coin into her pocket. Its weight was small, but what it meant wasn't. That evening, as she hung up her apron, Clara noticed Frank Delaney placing a new sign in the front window. Simple, elegant. Whoever you are, whatever you can pay, no one leaves hungry. When he noticed her watching, he gave a shrug. No speech, no announcement, just quiet understanding. Clara smiled, because that's how it starts. Seeing the hunger in others, and answering not with judgment, but with what's needed most. Food, dignity, kindness, without questions. As she walked home through the fading light, the challenge coin, a warm weight in her pocket, she thought of Noah, now growing up with his grandparents in Colorado, carrying his father's memory. And maybe, she hoped, carrying the knowledge that even in the darkest moments, kindness exists, even in unexpected places. You may forget this story in a few days, but if no one tells it again, history remains silent. Subscribe to Story New Day, where kindness, justice, and memory are protected until the end.